The Spirit in the Snow. The night sky was unclouded, and soared overhead in a vast vaulted arc, glittering in great swathes of fine frosted stars. Out here in the remote, sparsely inhabited countryside, grounded lights were outnumbered, and huddled low around lamps and lonely windows, dim beyond distant hills. For the first time in my life, scattered sparks blazed into constellations, and I saw through the eyes of my ancestors. The purity of a world at rest and cleansed by cold, stripped back to breath and bone. The realm of spirit seemed closer somehow. The air held the memory of ice that survives summers, chilling my lungs with each harsh intake of breath. But it was bearable. I was wrapped up tight in many layers, and the sturdy strides I'd made to reach this place had already managed to set a warm glow in my flesh. Besides, not even the bitter, biting cold could deter me from being here. I turned off my torch. Trudging a little further through the deepening drifts of snow, I looked up to my right and came to a halt. A dense, shadowy clump of twisted, crooked oak huddled close atop the hill nearby, their gnarled, naked branches as broad as the crown of a single sprawling tree. Undoubtedly, this was the copse that had been described to me. I peered about, my sight now adequately adjusted to the frail light of an almost fully consumed sickle moon, a sunken candle illuminating a maze of mirrors, and gasped softly under my breath at the enchanted quality of my surroundings. The transformative power of freshly fallen snow never failed to beguile me with the impression of a land under a spell, and here it lay thick over the gently sloping fields, reminding me of lopsided cakes generously smothered in icing. Whimsical visions slipped into my mind of decorative cake-top figures come alive, leaving trails of tiny footsteps across glazed, gleaming white. Amidst the frozen stillness, not a single solitary sound broke the silence of this windless winter night. I waited a while in the chilly gloom, increasingly thankful for the absence of a breeze, for the air was sharp, but only if disturbed would it sting. Not long after stopping, trying my best not to question the wisdom of being here so late with only a wish to warm me, the tangled shadows of the copse tightened into trunks as a pale spectral form drifted between them towards the outermost trees, hesitating upon the threshold. I waited as it wavered. Was it wary of straying out into the open, or weighing my worthiness as a witness? It hung in the air like a dim orb of pallid light, though my straining eyes glimpsed a glimmer of gold amidst the white, moving slowly at first, then gathering more speed, and I stared, transfixed, as it swept soundlessly through the dark, following the hedgerow as it ran around the furthest borders of the field in which I was standing. Then, as though suddenly drawn to my presence, it altered its course and began to glide steadily towards me. As it approached, I noticed with surprise that its weightless flight remained utterly silent despite getting nearer. In addition to the noiseless night, the strangeness of motion without sound to accompany it momentarily alarmed me, and if not for the crisp crunch of compressed snow beneath my shifting boots, I might have believed that I had somehow gone deaf without realizing. Despite my increasingly ungovernable apprehension, I remained in wait where I stood, and as the ghostly apparition was almost at the point of coming fully upon me, the onset of fear I had been resisting gave way to the beginnings of an inexplicable upwelling of the most captivating, joyful wonder. As I gazed wide-eyed upon it, I discerned from its faintly luminous, silvery white silhouette a pair of long, slender wings, rounded at the ends and softened at the edges, gilded gold above and pearly white beneath. They were outstretched and barely beating, as though spread in memory of flight, but now unnecessary in spirit. In a single effortless motion, the enigmatic inhabitant of the copse swooped upwards directly in front of me, then, in a flash of gold-flecked white, halted its flight in mid-air, whereupon it faced me directly, causing me to lean sharply backwards and almost slip and lose my balance. It hung in the air with its wings wide outspread, though not beating, and I gaped, enraptured, before it. Up close it was clear that its icy incandescence was warmed by feathered gold in those places facing away from me. The simplicity of its elegance was startling. An open, moon-pale, heart-shaped face with two big, dark eyes staring back, penetrating so deep it seemed its gaze passed straight through me. Its movement had an ethereal, untethered quality, as though it was unbound by the rules governing traversal through a physical space, and its body seemed partially translucent somehow, like a phantom, radiating a soothing, achingly tender light. I had seen barn owls before, up close in captivity or from afar as a brief ghostly blur easily confused with a trick of the fading light. But this was something more, something fit to wear the grace of such a form, and exult in it. Or perhaps it was just a nocturnal animal as unremarkable as any other, and I merely saw what I wished to see, something that proved possible, impossibility. And yet, I had never encountered any earthly creature as bewitching and fair as this, a being unbeholden to the laws of material existence to which we entrust our understanding. Trusting that its interest in me was benign, even beneficent, I relinquished my will to its influence, and as I felt its wise sight delve deeper, the grey, snowy landscape shrunk to a speck, then disappeared altogether as my outer vision went blind. My inner awareness floated formless in the absence of thought. The heedless noise that usually cluttered my mind had been unaccountably silenced. Never before had I felt such purity of peace, like home suddenly being wherever I was, after years of finding it on the private side of a locked door. Before me stood the mysterious being, its soft, diffused glow now beaming bright in contrast with the dark emptiness of my calm, clarified mind. Though resplendent like crystalline ice reflecting the midday sun, its luminance did not glare, and was surprisingly mild to look upon. Its figure had altered too. Now upright and somewhat human in form, it displayed a feminine appearance, while a shimmering silver-gold cloak hung seamlessly from its shoulders in the shape of two great folded wings. Its face remained open and unchanged, however, though the radiance of its features concealed the specific details and dimensions of its visage, so I was not sure if it was an elaborate mask or a true countenance so unlike anything I was familiar with. I struggled to accept what I was seeing. The light emanating from the being reached out, filling the emptiness around me as I was enveloped utterly by what I can only describe as pure, unconditional acceptance and understanding. Secure in its embrace, half a heart no longer lost to vigilance, I reunited with my childhood spirit, and held his hand, warm with the absence of a chill, not fighting for fuel to keep burning. All the accumulated layers fell away, as though they were simply yet another set of dirty clothes that needed washing, plates of armor that protected only themselves, until eventually all that remained was the seed of me, the ineradicable essence of my existence. But I still had one more thing to let go, though I clung to it still so tightly. Knowledge unlocked within me. Fear fools us into fighting for what can never be taken from us, and we cannot take something away by adding to it or covering it up. I feared dissolution, that by forsaking all that festered beyond healing, I would be diminished to a point past which there would be no hope of returning. And yet, with nothing left to lose, my fears now seemed small and helpless, my grip on them gradually and ineluctably loosening. I marvelled at the ease with which they were finally surrendered. How natural and obvious to find that I still was, with them gone. After having so much taken away, what a welcome contradiction it was to feel whole despite this. I was transparent, yet remained tangible enough to recognize and to hold. The consequences of my actions were nothing but obscure visions of the dissociated past, impossible to look at directly, that could just as likely be the recollections of dreams as of reality. There was no grudge, no bitterness, no resentment, no pride, no hostility to hinder or distract me from appreciating the misguided motives and unfounded fears that drove others to wrongful or incomprehensible action. I could give my understanding freely, with no risk of compromising the security of my own situation by sympathizing with someone else's. No longer too busy safeguarding my own well-being to spare enough concern for others whose needs might compete with mine. Such troubles were like tanks in a war zone that look like toys from a safe distance. The futility of the same fight. I felt the pain of both conflicting sides, to the point where each legitimate grievance cancelled out the other, and I knew that there are no sides, only the shared struggle to survive, and have our souls survive along with our life. Gently my little soul led me away from the light. I awoke to breathless cold, kneeling in a circle of melted snow. Burgeoning bliss swelled against the boundary of my being, spreading warmth to the tips of each limb and igniting a spark in the heart of every cell. The mysterious force had gathered each sundered fragment of my soul and forged it anew, leaving it fluttering inside me as light and leaping as a child's unencumbered, carefree spirit. I searched for signs of the ghost, but could catch no further sight of it. It had melted away into the darkness as seamlessly as snowflakes landing on water. The still air began to stir, and the settled snow resumed its gentle glistening. I buried my head in my hands and wept at the boundless beauty of it all. My cheeks soon grew stiff, with tears frozen before they could fall. I squinted up at the now semi-shrouded sky, entranced by a delicate display that glittered and shimmered in the dim, secretive light, as the moisture in the air gradually froze. It seemed the stars themselves were coming loose, floating down to earth through the gaps between the encroaching clouds like a sprinkling of silver dust, until eventually I could no longer discern the stars or the sliver of waning moon through the flurry of thickening snow at all. I sank into a dream of downy white feathers smothering my senses as they blocked out the creeping cold. I tore myself away to stand up. With one last, lingering glance at the now obscured copse sat atop the vanishing hill, I turned to face the way I had come. The ineffable warmth withdrew, shrinking to my core, not leaving but returning to me more. Shivering, I switched my torch back on and began to walk. As I placed my feet carefully before me, wary of stumbling on concealed frozen soil, I recalled my meeting with the local farmer who tended this bleak, wistful land. Amidst talk of recent rumours and fragments of forgotten folklore, he seemed to come under the sway of a weary, well-acquainted sorrow, so unspoiled by bitterness I longed to know its source. I've been drawn back there many times over the years, lured by the hope of another glimpse, even a fleeting one, from afar, he confessed, trailing off as he caught sight of something unseen in the invisible distance, a faint glow softening his rough, worn features as his eyes brightened fondly at some private, cherished recollection. Eventually he sighed deeply, his gaze returning from wherever it had wandered. "But don't fret," he said, measuring me up, almost pityingly. "The ache that remains after the feeling fades. You'll stop noticing it eventually." His parting words had been disconcerting, though their meaning mystified me. Yet now I understood them as intimately as though I had uttered them myself.